lessons of history, in which wars are the results of conflicts between nations armed to the teeth and directly suspicious of attack by the other. But an anarcho-capitalist society would pose no threat of aggression to anybody, and to suggest that it would be to be talking about something, a society that does not follow the non-aggression axiom, and is thus not an anarcho-capitalist society. Throughout history, people have been identified with their state, thus making the slaughter of innocent people acceptable, because ultimately states view other states as enemies, failing to recognize that it is individuals fighting other individuals, most of which simply want to live and do not deserve to die. Thus, thirdly, it would be impossible for such an identification to be established if there were no state. But even supposing that some police company went off the hangar and decided to attack Canada, the Canadian Army would recognize that it is the police service which is to blame and not all Americans, as they would now. So rather than bombing New York as retaliation, Canada, and probably the majority of citizens who did not agree with the unprovoked aggression, would attempt to put down the specific aggressor, because an anarcho-capitalist society recognizes that it is individuals who must come together and uphold their rights and the rights of others. There would be no delusion that a state is something separate from individuals who compose it. Thus, no one could possibly believe that there is anything which protects them but their fellow man. Now, is it clear that anarcho-capitalism requires cooperation to exist in a greater extent than conflict? However, this question also assumes that this anarcho-capitalist society has, for some reason, only been established in America. Wait for this. But should we assume this? What is wrong with assuming the entire world is anarcho-capitalist and see if we like the way it looks? I believe I've shown that an anarcho-capitalist society is a viable, fair, and efficient society. So if we can make the whole world anarcho-capitalist, why shouldn't we? Certainly there is nothing wrong with individual liberty and responsibility, coupled with freedom of choice and voluntary interactions with others. However, let's say country A, probably founded by the plaintiff in our, I guess it would be defendant in our previous case, and country B would like to have armies. Let's say that B is a little more gung-ho about it, and is thus, instead of being an anarcho-capitalist society, they decide to try a society that's a little bit more violent and bloodthirsty, a democracy, for instance. In fact, B is going to use its army to attack A. How will A defend itself? That is, how will A afford to construct an army? Hopefully a few of you have already caught on to this hypothetical I set as a trap. If A is really an anarcho-capitalist society, there wouldn't be any country A deciding to create an army. It would be merely a collection of individuals deciding whether they think it would be worth it to defend their property. So yeah, be careful. But let's assume there's a little community. Oh, let's go over here. Well, let's assume there's a little community. Sorry. That's anarcho-capitalist. And I did not think this would be this difficult. Hold on. And it's conveniently a circle. Let's say, to make things easier, that each house, which is just in here, is worth $100,000 and that there's 10,000 of them. So the community is worth collectively a crisp $1 billion. And suppose you all they have to do to hold off the attacking B army is this. Horse. A spear. Okay. And all they have to do to hold back this army is, say, spend $50 million worth of missiles, say buy 100 missiles or something, for protection and defense. So if everyone in this society contributes $500, they can protect $100,000. And that's not an unreasonable thing to do. However, if you're at the center of this circle, you realize that this B army isn't going to be attacking you, isn't going to be fighting you. They're going to attack the edges first. So it dawns on you, why should you pay for defense? Why should you pay for defense? There are 9,999 other people it affects more. Let them worry about it. And other people near the middle of the circle would also realize this. And maybe B's army is coming from the east, and these people don't have to worry about it. The West doesn't have, well, with each person who decides not to pay, the price of protection begins to rise, and once it reaches a certain point, the people on the eastern edge, right here, will consider it more reasonable to up and run than to pay the vast sum of money to defend what they might not consider worth it. So you've got the eastern side jumping ship, and no one has paid for defenses. And there's no A army, and B comes in and just sweeps the whole community. This, in a nutshell, is the free rider problem. That is the constant pain in the ass of anyone trying to develop a voluntary defense system. This is tricky. Many people have said that the Coase theorem explains this situation away. Whatever explains this situation away, since whatever solution is best will ultimately be provided by the market. If it's economically feasible, simply to be incorporated into country B rather than fight it, this is what will happen. If people value their little anarchy more than they value the prospect of leaving it, they will defend it. I must stress this. I cannot accurately predict what exactly will occur in an anarcho-capitalist society, for the simple fact that more people with more minds, and not just me and mine, will be deciding what they wish to see out of it. Anarcho-capitalism is ultimately very flexible with few absolutes. Besides, the contingencies of history make whatever I would try to predict, even in the near future, almost entirely worthless. Honestly, who 100 years ago would have been able to predict the iPod? And besides, while we're on the subject, advancement does not progress by decree. If 100 or 200 years ago, the King or Queen of England said, make me a box that will show moving pictures of me, not only pictures, but sounds as well. I want the image to be so real that it might very well be mistaken for me. No matter how much money the King or Queen poured into this venture, it is doubtful anyone would have invented the cathode ray tube necessary to construct a modern television. Such progress was made by an immeasurable amount of individuals mostly concerned with themselves and bettering their lives. This self-interest has benefited practically the entirety of humanity, and yet not a single person could, even if they tried, predict where this self-interest would specifically lead. All that can really be predicted is that on the free market, all those who participate necessarily benefit, at least in the ex ante sense. So what people decide on the market is what they think will benefit them. So how the people respond to the free rider problem will, by definition, be what benefits the most of them in the long run. Well, is there any way we can even hint at what the solution might be? Yes, I believe we can. Let me abstract the problem a little with a similar situation known as the prisoner's dilemma. Two criminals, A and B, are put in separate rooms and questioned separately. If neither one rolls on the other, they each get 2 years in prison. Right here. However, cops being the nice guys they are, they decide to offer a deal. If A turns on B, they'll let A go scot-free and throw the book at B. So that's right there. So A gets 0 years, B gets 5 years. They give the same deal to B. They give the same deal to B. Now, what should A or B do? Well, from A's perspective, there are two options to choose from. Stay quiet and get 2 years, or renege and do nothing, and defect, and do no time. From A's perspective, it appears always to be beneficial to rat on B. Because even if B rats on A either gets 0 years or 4 years, which is better than if he cooperated, right here, and be defective. So it makes sense, no matter what, to defect, because he either gets 0 years or 4, which is better than 5. And the same applies to B. So it appears that purely blind self-interest will result in both parties serving 4 years. But if they are smart or had ancestors who were, they will both stay silent and serve 2 years in jail, which in the long run is the best strategy. Well, wouldn't you know it? If A and B weren't fictional characters, but human beings, they would in fact have ancestors who knew how to properly play this game. Evidence for this is listed all over, Evidence is listed all over the biological and psychological and game theory literature. In fact, your own indignation at someone not earning their keep or paying